There's a wave of legal tender legislation sweeping the country. The ability for you to use gold and silver as the founding fathers intended. Today, that wave is landing in Missouri. And we have three leaders in the legal tender legislation movement joining us live to talk about the latest of what's going on. We're joined by Daniel Diaz and Jim Forsythe of Citizens for Sound Money, and the one and only Pat Holland from the Missouri Freedom Initiative. We're going to talk about what's going on a national basis, but we're going to zoom into Missouri because that's where they all are today. Guys, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Hey, Ron, thanks for having us on again.
Yeah, and let's make that 4 leaders, including you.
Yeah, there's 4 of us in Missouri, Ron.
There's 4 of us. Yeah. I'd like to say we have Jim Forsythe from New Hampshire, who's here joining us, right? And Daniel Diaz from, is it Miami, correct, Dan?
Florida, Sebastian, to be specific.
Okay. All here in Missouri, because there's some big things going on in Missouri today with this legal tender legislation move. Who wants to start to kind of bring us up to speed in what's going on?
If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and get us started, Ron, for sure. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I'm on the road right now, gang. I am heading up to Jefferson City for a hearing on HB 1955, the Constitutional Money Act in the state of Missouri. Now, I am honored to have Jim Forsythe and Daniel Dietz actually joining me to testify in front of the Banking Committee, the Financial Institutions Committee, the guys who think of themselves as the smartest guys in the room. Well, everything's about to change in that hearing because the smartest guys are showing up to testify. We're going out there to knock this out of the park and help get this going again, despite the fact, we have forces raging against us.
Wow. So Daniel and Jim came all the way to Missouri just to testify in front of this banking committee. What do you guys hope to achieve, or what message do you want to communicate to these the Missouri Banking Committee regarding this movement within the legal tender legislation area?
Well, I was talking to Patrick yesterday, and I asked him about the committee, and he was telling me about bankers. And, I asked him, how do they feel about inflation? Do they know inflation? And they're bankers. So I think my goal for my testimony is really to bring the inflation to life. I have a few talks where I compare what $20 could purchase 110 years ago versus today, the prices of a home 1973 today. And I think those examples bring it to life versus just reading statistics and numbers of how much debt we have, what the inflation is, because percentages, it's an abstract concept, but when you bring the percentages to life by showing them one $20 bill could buy an ounce versus 102 $20 bills buys an ounce today, it brings to life how weak the dollar has gotten over the last 100 years. And that's kind of the message I want to drive home. And Jim and I were actually strategizing last night on what our testimony is going to be about. I'm going to be more about inflation, the loss of power, purchasing power of the dollar, and the strength of gold and silver as money. And then I think Jim is going to kind of hit on the electronic currency. I'll let him share what he's going to talk about.
And I want to interject something very quickly, Daniel. And thank you, Pat, for your introduction as to what's going on today. But don't forget, Missouri is the show me state. So you're going to be showing those bankers what's going on. Go ahead, Jim.
I think Daniel's plan is to have a stack of dollar bills for how much an ounce of gold was back when we were on the gold standard, and a stack of dollar bills on how much it costs now. Got a thick wad of cash to make that props. But why don't we talk a little bit about what the bill does? And first off, huge kudos to Patrick, he started this effort before we were involved at all. He's done a really amazing job of writing a bill that is both very succinct and very simple, yet extremely powerful. Because what it does is it declares gold and silver as legal tender, and it defines specie. Essentially coins, goldbacks, stuff like that are specie. And he's been aggressive. He says, U.S. minted coins are legal tender. And then everything else that's not a Nazi coin, that has Nazi symbol. I guess Patrick was telling us, last year that people were like, oh, there's going to be Nazi gold and stuff like that, which is ludicrous. So anyway, so it's that part of it is, you know, very simple yet very powerful, because it doesn't have a short list of specie that's legal tender. It's everything that's not that doesn't have Nazi symbolism to it. And then it very simply defines electronic currency as gold and silver bullion in a depository, which can be transferred electronically. So that would include companies like Lode, Kinesis, Oris, and Clint, you know, would all count on that. And it basically says that these are also legal tender, which is a very powerful thing, but very, very simple, doesn't set up a state depository, doesn't set up, you know, a state electronic currency, just leaves it up to the free market. There's one clause in there that I've read this and I really love it. So I think Patrick got some of his language from our bills, but he added this in. So it says, you know, the state shall not enforce or attempt to enforce any federal acts, laws, executive orders, administrative orders, rules, regulations, statutes, or ordinances infringing on the right of a person to keep and use specie legal tender and electronic currency as provided in this section. That's a freaking genius clause in there, because you know what's going to happen is you pass this, and then the federal government's going to make rules and restrictions to try to stop it, and they should not be able to. It's the state's rights. So this is a preemptive case of state nullification. You know, there's no laws that would restrict this right now, but by putting that clause in there, he really makes it bulletproof. You know, we need to pick up that language in our version of the bill as well. It's wonderful.
Hey, Jim, thank you very much. But I'll tell you what, when I'm writing legislation, I always steal from the best. And by the way, just so everyone knows, there is absolutely no copyright on legislation. In fact, it's illegal to copyright legislation. So every state can steal ideas from other states. That's the idea. A good idea should not be limited to one state. It should be available to all states. And getting legal tender, Missouri's a little late to the game. We got 6 states ahead of us that actually got it done. But that, you know, at least we're not, you know, 46, right? I'll tell you what I'm going to testify on, Ron. All the states that are actually doing stuff with silver and gold legislation in 2024. And I was updated by Daniel when I was talking to him yesterday. He's thinking there's 24 or 25 states that have legal tender or some type of silver and gold legislation working towards legal tender or depositories.
Hey, Pat, let me interject quickly, and then I'm going to come back to you. I want to read through for the viewers. We've got hundreds of people joining us right now, all over the country, and I can do it fast. I'm a fast reader. I just want to read the most up-to-date list that I have of states that have some form of legal tender legislation pending. We have Alaska, Florida, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Utah, Vermont, and finally West Virginia. Back to you, Pat.
Okay, I want to point out that there's probably a lot more. My cursory investigation was based on 10th Amendment Center's research. But I want to say there's a lot of states that are doing multiple bills. A great example of this is Idaho. And so I was talking to those folks last year, if you remember, Ron. I'm not talking to them so much this year because I'm just swamped. But in Idaho, they've got 2 bills. One of them is it's a makeshift depository. And the other one is for legal tender status for gold and silver, and also removing capital gains. So some states have multiple bills, but there's like 25 states in the game this year.
Yeah.
And you know why that is, Ron? Is that because they're all playing follow the leader? Or is that because they've all identified a problem coming down the pike with our economy in the United States and losing value in the dollar and looking for a way to protect their citizens? I think it's the latter.
Because inflation is theft, essentially.
But the digital dollar too. I mean, that's a big threat too. But you're right, inflation is a big problem.
Yeah. So I want to ask Daniel and Jim to comment on this, and then get some more comments from you also on this, Pat. But again, right now, we've got the four of us talking, but there are hundreds of people joining us live, most of which are in the United States. As they're sitting out there, and they're all, I can tell you with a high level of confidence, very interested in silver or gold. That's the audience here in Ron's basement. Why is this type of legislation important to them? They're typically going to be silver stackers, gold stackers. Why is legal tender legislation important to the average gold and silver stacker?
Well, I like to talk about three. This goes beyond gold and silver stackers for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really three big reasons. The one that we all know about is inflation. The dollar's lost 99% of its value since going off the gold standard, or 98%. But what's important about that inflation is it hits people very unevenly. When the Federal Reserve prints new dollars, the people that get them first get them before they've been devalued, and they get them, at a low interest rate, sometimes at zero. So JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, they can borrow near 0% and then charge us 12% on credit cards, 18% on credit cards. And of course they're getting rich, and they're getting rich because of the monopoly power. So that's the Cantillon effect. It's, the rich get richer, the poor and the middle class get screwed. Because we get the dollars last, and we hit the impact of inflation. So another thing is Trippin's dilemma, which is when you have the U.S. dollar is the world reserve's currency and is fiat. He wrote that what that will cause is you're going to print your way to prosperity versus working, and it'll completely erode the middle class and the manufacturing base. And we've seen exactly that since going off the gold standard. The U.S. economy has become just completely financialized, and we're making less and less things. The middle class is getting devastated. And so that's another reason why getting back onto a gold standard is really important for this country. And states are our natural allies because they don't benefit from the money printing. It's the Federal Reserve that does. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we're concentrating our efforts at the state level versus at the federal level. We're playing defense on the federal level. And that's why I like that clause that I read out, is it's, this bill is aggressive at the state level and then defends against the federal level. Great case of state nullification.
Yeah. And then on a more practical, personal level, I travel a lot, and I talk to people, and I share and spread the sound money gospel, sound money movement, and people just feel there's something wrong, right? Like I've recently moved to Indian River County. I'm getting involved with the local party, and I've joined some Patriot groups. And I just threw out, like last week, like, hey, anybody, I'm the gold silver guy, anybody want to buy some gold and silver? And I had at least 5 people immediately reach out to me, because people know there's a problem with the economy. People know that they're losing purchasing power. They might not know the exact reasons, but they see the inner turmoil in our country. Our infrastructure is vulnerable. Last week, about AT&T and Verizon, everybody, Xfinity, they started losing communication. It's getting scary out there, and people want to know what's going to happen if or when, and in some people's case, the dollar and the economy is going to collapse. What are we going to use for bartering? How are we going to preserve our purchasing power if, let's say, it doesn't collapse? The dollar just keeps getting printed into oblivion. And gold and silver has maintained its purchasing power for millennia. It has been money for 10,000 years. And the examples that I give, you'll see if you watch the testimony today, are very practical applications on why you want to put your wealth, your economic energy into gold and silver, because gold and silver has preserved over the last 100 years the purchase power. I'll just give you this quick example. 110 years ago, $20 bought you an ounce of gold. What could that buy you? If you wanted to, you could buy a top hat, a tuxedo, a shirt, shoes, a pocket watch, flowers, and candy for your date. What can $20 today buy you? I spoke recently, and somebody said barely a McDonald's Happy Meal, $20. When last 110 years ago, you could buy an ounce of gold. But what can you buy with an ounce of gold today, which is about $2,020, $2,004? Well, if I wanted to, I could buy a top hat, a tuxedo, shoes, shirt, pocket watch, flowers, and
wait a minute. I really want to see you in a tuxedo with a top hat now.
but that's my point, because gold is money. It maintains purchasing power. And
all the way back to Roman times.
Up to Roman
I
times.
read an article talking about the number of loaves of bread you could get for an ounce in Roman times versus now, and it's the same.
Yeah.
But due to productivity increases, the average wages compared to Roman times have gone up by fivefold. But because of productivity,
I want to touch on a couple things here before I forget. Number one, I really do expect today when I see this testimony that Daniel have on a tuxedo and a top hat. But back to what he said, something at the beginning that got me thinking about people out there feeling something's not right, something's wrong, and I think that possibly we can even look at what's going on with Costco. In Costco selling this, they sold $100 million worth of gold in their most recently completed fiscal quarter in 3 months. And now they're selling American. So I think there is a sense out there in the general public that something's wrong. And if I circle back to Jim, what you were saying, it got me thinking about the loss in value of the U.S. dollar. Our government runs, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but our government runs these massive deficits, right? They spend more money than they bring in. And there's really only one of two ways they can plug that gap. They could raise taxes, or they could basically print money or use printed money. And if they raise taxes, well, the rich don't like that, and that's probably the more responsible thing to do, but the more painful thing to do. So instead, they use printed money, and that devalues the currency. And like you said, that money, that cheap money, goes to the wealthy first. It also gets fed through into places like the stock market and the real estate market. So, there's asset price appreciation or inflation there as well. But for the middle class, for the people that don't own a lot of real estate, that don't own a lot of stocks, that are the lower and middle tier in the country, what they get out of that is a bunch of inflation. And is that why they call inflation the hidden tax? Did I do a decent job of describing that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like my son, has kind of begged for a raise for years and years. He finally gets a raise, and then his rent increases by the exact amount of his raise.
Yeah.
And that's typical here in the US is, wages don't go up faster than inflation. They go up lower than inflation, and the inflation just screws you. But yeah, the people with a lot of stocks, they get this massive, asset price inflation that they benefit from, especially some of them are on leverage.
Yeah.
But I wanted to address, I didn't really answer your question because I made it more general. You were asking about what will this do for the average gold and silver stacker. So we all know that gold and silver prices are extremely volatile, but that's an artifact of them being demonetized. Once gold and silver are remonetized, and in this case, Missouri may pass it, so that's and it's voluntary, so the uptake may not be 100%, but what it'll do is it'll provide increasing stability, and then there should be, people talk about like these fantastical gold price predictions, and I don't disagree with them, but they're making a prediction of gold price in dollars when dollars are going to zero, so it doesn't really mean a whole lot. It's what's the purchasing power going to do. I think there will be kind of a one-time uptick in gold's purchasing power as it gets remonetized because it's an increased demand for gold. But I would expect that we would see price stability. Like back when we were on a gold standard, you didn't have, in silver standard, silver didn't move 5% in a day because it was money. So the more volume of transactions you get, the more stable it becomes. And so that's what I would expect to see for gold and silver stackers. And the electronic currency portion of that is extremely critical because what I expect to have happen, well, not what I expect, this is what is happening, is these gold and silver company or the asset-backed digital currency companies are starting to go direct to miners and buy gold and silver to back their currency. And as demand for the currencies increase with bills like this, that's going to happen more and more, and COMEX is going to get increasingly bypassed, going direct to the physical monetary market, which will provide a lot of stability. And I'm really excited about that because, the memo from the State Department that was published back when we went off the gold standard basically said we'll create a futures market that will create highly leveraged system with a lot of volatility that will discourage people from holding gold and silver. But if we can remonetize it, then that's going to get reversed.
Yeah, boy, that's a great point, Jim. Right, that this legislation could facilitate a massive increase in demand for silver and gold, and we all think of price, but also provide some stability as well. And I also want to point out, when I asked that question, I said, "What is this going to do for just the silver and gold stacker?" It really does. This legislation doesn't just help silver and gold stackers, but it helps the entire state population in the states where the legislation is being enacted.
And for the people that say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. This bill is not a bill that says, we're going to make it an electronic currency. It's a bill that says physical gold and silver is legal tender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then if you take physical gold and silver and make it electronically transferable, that's also legal tender. So it really is emphasizing that cash component. And that's why we're excited to be partnered with Goldback and Gold ATM. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos of the gold ATMs, but I'm so excited about that. This is a company that does like $1 billion in transactions with Bitcoin ATMs. And now they're getting into the gold ATM space. So, those Costco numbers can get filtered over into Goldbacks getting spit out of an ATM. Then you link those ATMs to an electronic currency. Now you have your own bank account with gold and silver that you can withdraw at an ATM, make private transactions using cash. Gold is cash, and yeah, it's really exciting. And it's been great working with all these partners. We got to give a big shout out to Kevin Freeman of Economic War Room. They're the reason why we've got over 20 states doing this. They're a big part of that. And Patrick made a comment about, you can't copyright this stuff, it gets shared. And it's really been really cool to see, as we push this legislation in different states, what we learn from different states and getting feedback. For example, the New Hampshire bill, it's going to interim study committee. So that's dead for this year. However, the feedback we got from them was they really didn't want like a state depository and a state electronic currency, especially the bankers, because it looks like a state bank. But instead, we think we can go forward with a licensing structure for stable coins, which would include a US dollar based, but American stable coin with, proof of reserve, audits, et cetera, but then also a gold and silver stable coin. So we didn't get something passed in New Hampshire, but we learned what fits for them. And then we're going to put that forward. And likewise, seeing what Patrick's done here in Missouri, that language about the Fed, we love that language, so we can put that into bills for next year. So this is going to be a multi-year process. Florida is one that we're not going to get the electronic currency portion passed, but we're not going to talk about what we think in Florida, but we put a lot of work in there. We'll see hopefully some benefits this year, but we're going to see a lot of benefits next year. Same with New Hampshire. So if Missouri passes this, I think this will be the first state to pass some sort of form of electronic currency, and that's huge.
Yeah, and speaking about our partners at the Economic War Room, we're talking to Mike Carter last night, and we said, hey, we're here in Missouri. What are some other states that we could be deployed, and what some states that are already passing some parts of the bill? And he gave us a list of states that are already going through committee, like Oklahoma, Arizona, Louisiana. He said is looking very good. What other states did it? Tennessee. Tennessee is looking extremely good. We might even get deployed there. And then we were talking about South Carolina. There's an independent in South Carolina who is a Democrat that is very interested in becoming the sponsor. And we have a lot of connections in South Carolina. So there were some issues there before, but we're going to try to get it back going in South Carolina. So even though some states like Florida, their legislative session ends next week, March 8th, that's it. So then but a lot of state legislatures still go through May, some through June, and then like California all year long. I don't think we're going to get in California. Maybe, who knows? The Golden State, maybe they'll pass the gold standard if they actually start thinking about it. But there are legislative sessions happening, through half the year, which we will be going to point in, like Missouri, testifying, and so forth. So it's very encouraging to see that almost half of the country is thinking or has developed legislation to bring gold and silver back as money.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, Daniel. It seems like half the country on some level is on board with this. And just my gut tells me when you talked about California, it feels like it's almost like we're at a tipping point where things could flow through. Like almost all of the states at some point are going to have to consider this or make moves in this direction. Is Pat Holland still with us? Pat,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Great. So, you've been sitting there. You're the leader here in Missouri. What are your thoughts, Pat, as you think about the typical Missouri resident? Why is this so important for them? And then go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about something that's maybe not quite as positive as kind of glass half empty kind of stuff, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'd like to talk about the very first duty of an elected official.
Mm-hmm.
The very first duty of an elected official, because they take an oath to the Constitution of the United States, and in the case of Missouri, the Missouri Constitution, their very first duty is to protect your rights. And we have a right to have gold and silver. And I'd like to report some bad news. I recently learned 15% of retired people are starting to enter the workforce again. And that's because inflation has ravaged their savings. And this is the fault of politicians that did not protect the rights of people. So I know we have politicians, we have people we like, we have people we maybe don't like so much. But the fact of the matter is, what we're doing today with Jim and Daniel and myself testifying is literally to hold these guys' feet to the fire and remind them that their job is to protect our rights. And one of those rights is enshrined in Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution. Gold and silver are money. So it's time for literally states to literally start doing what they were, the elected officials in those states were supposed to do, protect the rights of their citizens. And we, Ron, in Missouri, cannot control the printing of currency unless there's something about you that you've never told me. But I don't think we can affect the creation of brand new digits on a screen or paper dollars coming out of the Federal Reserve. But what we can do is we can educate people that there is a way out. We can educate legislators that may not know better that there is a way out. Remember now, it's been a long time since our great-grandparents were exchanging $20 bills for gold coins in a bank back in the 1920s and early 30s, right?
Yeah.
So they may not remember, but the important thing for everyone in Ron's basement to know, the basement dwellers need to know, that every single way that you can transact today with the dollar, with credit cards, ATM, cash, coins, we can do it all with gold and silver. The free market has all the solutions. They're already there. And that's why, as you comb through states' legislations smartly, you'll find that actually they're not letting the state determine how gold and silver are transferred or used. And that's because they're there to protect our rights, not to tamp down the actual transactional capabilities of gold and silver. So that's not the state's responsibility. That's the free market's responsibility. And they have been waiting in the wings for years for people like us to come forward in these states and actually get these actions going.
Yeah, Pat, I have to jump in. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I like to use this analogy that like silver and gold, it feels like to me, have been kind of hibernating like a bear hibernates, right? A bear is big and powerful, but it goes into hibernation, but it's still alive. And it feels like silver and gold have been in hibernation and are just beginning to stir and wake up, wanting to kind of reclaim their position of, I don't want to use the word power, but they are powerful, right? They're the universal currency, the timeless universal currency. I heard somebody say the other day, you can parachute out of a plane anywhere in the world. anywhere in the world with a pocket full of gold coins, and wherever you land, that gold is valuable. That silver is valuable. Sorry, I interrupted you, Pat.
I wanted to. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
I was going to say you're absolutely right. Gold and silver are universally recognized as money. In fact, if you go into Spanish-speaking nations, the word plata has two meanings. And so I'm sure there's a lot of Spanish folks that know Spanish that are listening right now, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. Plata, it's money and it's silver in Spanish. So even in the Spanish language, in the Spanish culture, in the Hispanic culture, silver is still money today. It's in their language. So that's something that doesn't escape my attention, by the way.
Yeah.
And by the way, I totally agree with you, Patrick, in the way of thinking about this is, a representative's job is you don't have to support everything that people want. You might have your own opinions and stuff, but when it comes to rights, they have a duty to vote for this. In other words, gold and silver is a constitutional right to use as legal tender. We got away from that, and it's not in legislation right now. But when a bill like this comes up, it doesn't matter whether they think it's a good idea, whether they want to do it personally. If there's a couple constituents that want it, it is their right, and they have a duty to pass this, as long as it's well written, and this bill is well written.
And I think it's also important to highlight some of the private business solutions out there that are trying to make gold and silver functional again. We talked about electronic currency. That's a part of the Missouri bill and a part of most of the bills across the country. This is a debit card. It's called Glint, the company right here. It's backed with gold. It's one of the few companies that have a gold debit card in the United States of the coalition partners we're with. There's others that are going to be rolling in with debit cards as well. But by making gold and silver functional again through electronic currency, there are some legal precedents and Supreme Court rulings that there might not be any taxation whatsoever on capital gains by making it functional. It's one thing to make it legal tender. Legal tender doesn't make gold and silver functional again because it's the value of gold and silver is maintained and the dollars collapse. So an ounce of silver used to be $1. Now it's about $22, $23. It's not functional. The only way to really make it functional is by digitizing it so that we can transfer the ownership. And yes, gold ATMs make it functional, but the smallest denomination is 1/1000th of an ounce, and it's about $4. So how do you do change with that if you say buy $2 worth of stuff? You can't just cut it in half. So it's functional to an extent, but really, if we're going to get down to a full economy, gold and silver has to be transactional, just like the dollar, which used to be backed by gold and silver. In fact, one thing that during our research, the first electronic transfer of money, which was backed by gold, happened in the 19th century with telegram. Telegram used to send messages electronically to another bank saying, hey, this person just transferred this amount of money. And this whole concept of transferring tangible assets goes back to the 19th century, crying out loud. So the whole idea of, we can't do that. It's not true. It's happening. And I think I was talking to the CEO and founder of gold ATMs last night, and we were just talking about Bitcoin and gold. And he's telling me, he's like, look, we're at the precipice with tokenized physical assets, meaning gold and silver. He's like, think of Bitcoin in 2011, 2012. That is kind of where we're at. Bitcoin was only around a $1 billion market cap. Right now, if you take all the asset-backed digital currencies right now, it's slightly over $1 billion. What he is telling me is, look, we're early in the tokenized assets of gold and silver, kind of like being in Bitcoin in 2011, 2012. Look at Bitcoin now, just 10 years later after that. We're at that $52,000 trillion market cap. That is what we anticipate is going to happen once the Sound Money Act and the Constitutional Money Act gets passed and the states start using electronic gold and silver. It's going to really ramp up the market cap and the amount of transactions that are happening on a daily basis.
Hey, Ron, there's a lot of good comments and stuff in the chat. Do we want to start?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go right ahead, Jim.
So I'm seeing a lot of negativity towards like digital gold products. I just want to say, like, first off, I understand where that comes from. If you look at GLD, SLV, I am convinced when the shit hits the fan, you read about the great taking. I think those will be taken. And the Fed will see that they need to back the, as the dollar starts to crumble, they'll see they need to back it with something, and they're going to take GLD and SLV. I'm convinced. I don't know that, but I think they will. Also, we've lost a lot of trust in systems like this through paper. Paper was an abstraction of the gold and silver that backed it, and the banks had these huge fractional reserve lending, which led to the Roaring '20s, then the Great Depression, and then eventually going off the gold standard. So I understand how trust has gotten massively eroded, but Bitcoin invented something great in the blockchain, which is you can have an immutable ledger of the circulation of the tokens,
Decentralized.
and decentralized. And so if a company publishes independent audits, say quarterly, like Kinesis does, and then you have the blockchain, which you can audit and you can verify that it's one-to-one. And most importantly, this is absolutely critical, if it's also redeemable on demand, then you can have a lot of confidence in that. And if you don't want to use that, that's fine. Goldbacks makes a great product that can be used as cash in cash transactions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not trusting to use a system like this and you're going to use cash, that's great. If you're not going to use cash, if you're just going to say, I don't trust anybody and I'm just going to put this stuff in my safe, I'm sorry, you're part of the problem. Unless you're starting to use gold and silver as money, you're part of the problem. It's a chicken or the egg problem. We'll get stability in prices and we'll get increased demand for gold and silver if we start using it as money. And if we don't, we're going to be stuck like this forever. So we need to start using money, gold and silver as money again.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, if I can, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Pat. Go ahead.
I wanted to mention something because Jim pointed out something incredibly important. And I do a lot of public speaking, as you know, Ron. In fact, I was actually speaking to the Republican Central Committee in Jackson County last night. One of the things I pointed out to them, and people are shocked when I tell them this, but this is verifiable. 30% of businesses in Wyoming accept goldbacks. 30%, and they proudly display these in the windows of their storefronts. We accept goldbacks. Yeah. So Wyoming is showing us the way. They're actually using gold as money again, and with goldbacks, nothing could be simpler. It's like using cash. It's the same thing.
I gotta jump in. I have to say one thing because
Sure.
I agree, and it may not be even everybody's entitled to their own opinions, right? But sure. I agree with what Jim said. I agree with what Pat said. But I want to point out one thing I always hear in the gold and silver community is this: silver and gold are money, right? There's this loud, this are the only form of real money. Well, then why not have a way that facilitates in a modern form a way that we can actually use it as money? Because where I live in St. Louis right now, if I want to take you out to lunch today and pay with silver, we're going to be hard pressed to find a restaurant that takes silver. We got to go to my local coin shop. I got to pay a big spread when I cash in my couple silver eagles because I know you guys like to eat well, right? And so if we're going to use silver and gold as money, then let's use it as money. And we do live in an electronic age, and I'm not an expert on the blockchain and tokenization, but I agree with Jim. There's a lot of just initial, what I would call contempt before investigation. People just hear it and say, no, that's bad. Anything electronic is bad. And I think if we're going to use silver and gold as money, and that we're going to have to find ways to facilitate it within the context of the modern world in which we live. And then my last point, then I'll get it back to you because my audience hears enough out of my mouth on a regular basis. None of this legislation, none of these movements takes away anyone's right to continue to hold their silver and gold to whatever extent they want at their home. It's only going to help. It's only going to help. I mean, if we start actually using silver and gold as real money, it's going to massively expand the precious metals world and provide benefit, provide stability, provide a way for people to protect themselves against inflation.
So let me make another point too. Imagine you're some smart guy and you want to start a company. if you want to try to make a lot of money, starting up a gold, silver blockchain company is not the way to do it, right? It's brutal. You're like facing opposition from the Fed, opposition from regulators. You're going to get sued, etc. You're just going to open a bank and do fiat and be a Cantillon. All right. So, we know these executives in these different companies, and they are believers. They are on our side. Trust me on this. Yeah. So, this whole we can't trust these guys. Of course, you shouldn't trust them blindly, but make sure they have audits. Make sure it's redeemable. Make sure that the blockchain can be audited to match the circulation so that it remains one-to-one. And then keep as much physical cash or physical gold and silver as you want. Only, what you can do is just deposit a little bit, especially with gold ATMs, once they get it where it goes both ways, is you could have a stack of, gold backs or gold in your safe. And then, if you want to go shopping at the grocery store, deposit them in your account, keep a couple $1,000s worth of gold and silver in your electronic gold account. And then you can swipe a debit card and have it converted to fiat at the point of sale. So you can manage, if you're not trusting, you can manage your risk. But unless we have that electronic component in this day and age, it's just not realistic for gold and silver to become money again if it's purely on a physical basis. We have to have a way to be able to transfer electronically.
Yeah, and one of the things that we did with the original version of the Sound Money Act, Constitution Money Act, was every bill had the depository language in there, creating a state depository so that the state can protect its assets as a bailee. However, in that language, we also have anti-confiscation language, basically saying no other government, no quasi-governmental agency, the federal government, nobody can seize the assets because it's not the state's assets. The state has a protective role in protecting those assets. And the reason that's in there is so that if the federal government does want to confiscate gold and make it illegal to own gold, the states have a legal standing to fight against the federal government in the courts to prevent them from seizing gold and silver. And that's the reason why that language is in there, the anti-confiscation. There is now, it sets up a future legal battle so that states have standing in protecting the gold and silver from confiscation of the federal government. Plus, you think Texas is going to allow the federal government to take their gold? Come on, it's going to be the same thing with Florida.
But again, this is why redemption is so important. Is let's say, and I see a lot of chat about, like seizing of gold and silver. Like I said, I think we'll do it with, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, the custodians of SLV and GLD. So yeah, they're going to do that. But for them to take, one of the companies that we're working with, they'd have to get into the vault, and that's going to take time, court orders, etc. In the meantime, redeem it.
Yeah.
If you see the threat of this, then you redeem it. And I know Kinesis has done that before, where in one jurisdiction they had some vaults in China, and things started to look bad on a regulatory basis, and so they just started moving everything out to a different country.
Yeah. And don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? I mean,
right. And a lot of the bills were stripping the depository language because it's scary and it seems to be too expensive to a lot of legislators.
A lot of libertarians don't like it, and so we may be moving more like Missouri's doing of a licensing structure, or just saying, this is the definition of electronic currency. If you meet these definitions, then it is legal tender as well. But it's really physical gold that's electronically transferable. So if you support legal tender of the physical asset, it's kind of a no-brainer to say, well, of course you can transfer it electronically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
a lot of these,
go ahead, Daniel.
I'll say this last thing. A lot of these companies like Kinesis, Load, Glint only has one vault, but they're going to get a vault in the United States. They're in Switzerland. But Kinesis, Load, what's another company?
Oris.
They have multiple vaults across the country. I think Kinesis has 15 or 13 vaults across the world.
13 in 9 countries, yeah.
So, if they see something happening in jurisdiction, they'll just ship the gold over. Yes, there is a real concern about confiscation, but I think today it would be very hard pressed legally. And I saw a couple of comments, and more there are no laws. But let's assume there is no civil war and the society doesn't collapse. Let's say there is still a legal framework and the government still exists. We will have a legal footing to actually protect the citizens' assets, and that's why we wanted to have the state establish a depository. But we in the laws we can still create a bailee relationship between the private entity that has the currency and like kinesis, it's a bailment situation and so forth. So there's other legal ways to protect people's gold and silver from potential confiscation, but that is a third party.
And let me just say, for all the people that freak out and are kind of live in fear, I think that's a shame. We outnumber them.
Yeah.
And Patrick's done a great job of showing that in Missouri. He faced some leadership opposition, right? Last year, he rallied the troops, and he's getting things done this year because we outnumber them. They can play tricks, they can play games, they can use the media against us, but we outnumber them, and we're going to win.
100%. Yeah.
Pat Holland, I think he's been unfortunately been dropped from the call. He's been a real warrior, and he's not paid for anything he does here in Missouri to get this legislation going. And it just feels like I said earlier, that it's spreading throughout the country. 25 states or 20 states that have already passed or are considering legislation. I want to wish you guys good luck today. You'll be in front of the banking committee. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Best of luck. Any final words? Did I miss anything?
Let me give you. We keep talking about how like the people are waking up. Let me give you an example. On the flight down here, I can't find my driver's license, so I had to fill out a form, and they asked me questions and verified it was me, but they had to walk me through security. And so the TSA agent, he empties all my stuff out. I had one of these. Several of these in my pocket. So he's looking at it, and I go, "Oh, you can take one." He looks at it, picks it up, and starts looking through it. And I said, "Yeah, with $34 trillion in debt, I'm worried about the dollar, so we're advocating for gold and silver as money."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Yeah, I've been watching some videos about that, and it's like $200,000 per person of debt. It's crazy." It's like, I've been thinking about buying some silver. This is a TSA agent.
Yeah.
Right? So it's widespread. The conversations I have, people, I used to have the conversations 10 years ago and people didn't care.
Yeah.
But they care now.
And like on my connecting flight from Dallas to Kansas, I was sitting next to a gentleman who works for FEMA, and we just started talking. He asked me what I did. I told him what I was doing while I was flying to Kansas. And he was just drawn in, and he understood there was a problem, and he was engaging and asking questions. And I gave him my contact information, and he's interested in buying gold and silver now to protect his assets, because I explained to him how the currency is created, how inflation is theft, and it really resonated with him very quickly. And that's the case everywhere I go. I'm like an apostle for the sound money movement. I always talk to everybody about the sound money gospel. And it resonates with almost every single person I talk to. And that's how I know, and that's why these bills are getting passed, because so many people, the common person and the legislators that are pushing these bills, see a problem. They're trying to find a solution. That solution is gold and silver.
Yeah. Well, it certainly feels like to me that the interest level is percolating. The other thing I want to bring up is the good work that Pat Holland's doing, that you guys are doing, that even maybe I could say I'm doing as well.
Absolutely.
That we are, we are still we're part of a growing minority, I would say at this point. But that what we're doing is really good in its nature, and I think patriotic, right? I think we're actually and courageous to want to stand up and say, hey, what's going on isn't right. So I think it makes sense that Daniel, when you're on the airplane, the guy next to you is interested, or Jim, your example of going through the security checkpoint, that we're and I think sometimes we can feel like we're on the fringe, but that what we really are doing is what the founding fathers, that they would be, they're looking down upon us in a proud manner, is what I.
Actually in the New Hampshire hearing, one of the guys first thanked me for my service in the military, and then said, well, you're kind of betting against the U.S. government. Isn't that unpatriotic? And I kind of let him have it. Yeah. And I wound up kind of in tears near the end. I was like, no, this is not unpatriotic. The government is not our country. The government is the people and the Constitution. Yeah. And when you see something going wrong, it's your patriotic duty to change it. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Wow. We'll end with that. Guys, good luck. Thank you, Jim. That was powerful. I almost brought me to tears. Good luck today with your testimony in front of the committee. Unfortunately, we lost our connection here with Pat Holland, but thank you to Pat for joining us today. Jim and Daniel are with the Citizens for Sound Money, and Pat Holland's organization is the Missouri Freedom Initiative. Guys, you're always welcome in the basement. On behalf of myself and everybody who joined us, thank you.
I see a lot of great comments, folks. Call your representative and tell them you want this, please.
And if you want us to continue going around the country, go to citizensoundmoney.org, click on donate, and help us continue fighting for a sound money movement.
Yeah, because it's working. It's working. Like, you know, Joe Biden can say Bidenomics is working. Well, this is working too. So I'll put my money on Citizens for Sound Money. Thanks, guys. Well, it's good luck today. We'll see you soon. Okay.
See ya.